Hey guys, Ex-Peon here, and we are back again with part 3 of our OD&D Iceberg. So let's get right into it. Tier 8, the Paladin's Horse. Among the other boons the Paladin subclass gets in the Greyhawk supplement is access to a horse. Not a magical or immortal horse, just a horse. The specific details are that Paladins can at any time obtain this horse, but they can't get a new one for 10 years, even if the first one dies. Why? Because screw you, that's why. Joking aside, I honestly can't imagine why the horse is so hard to replace, other than to prevent players from abusing this mechanic. I could easily see a real schemer crossing a chasm by summoning his horse over and over just to have it jump into the chasm and slowly create a bridge out of horse corpses. For curiosity's sake, I compared the Paladin's horse to the base OD&D horse, and this is how it stacks up. The base heavy horse has 3 hit dice, moves 12 inches per round, twice that of your average dwarf, which I guess is good, and has an armor class of 7, which is equivalent to leather armor. The Paladin's horse, on the other hand, has an armor class of 5, which is equivalent to chain armor, moves 18 inches per round, so 3 times faster than your average dwarf, has 5 plus 1 hit dice, and has, quote, high intelligence. So it's actually a really good horse, as far as I can tell. If your campaign is mostly focused on dungeoneering, though, it's probably not too impactful a feature. 100 XP per hit dice is ridiculous. In the base version of OD&D, players get 100 experience points per hit dice of monster defeated. The section that this is found in is somewhat complex, but that's the basic gist. That's on top of getting 1 point of XP for every gold piece found, including treasure that is equivalent to a certain amount of gold pieces. In the Greyhawk supplement, the authors call this ridiculous and provide an alternative table which greatly reduces the amount of XP one gets for defeating a monster. That former 100 XP from a single hit dice monster becomes 10 XP, and it's divided equally between all players. This might sound like a minor change, but it actually makes a huge difference. The original rule made it so an average first level fighter could level up after killing 20 single hit dice enemies. That's a lot, but that's on top of any treasure gotten, making it so even treasureless enemies were worth fighting. The amended rules make it so it's not even worth fighting an enemy without treasure. There are pros and cons to both. I've linked a video by the YouTuber Bandits Keep about both systems and which one he prefers if you want to explore that topic in more depth. Remove traps didn't apply to all traps. There's a surprising amount of nuance to some of these original D&D rules, and that's true for the basic thief ability of removing traps. The Greyhawk supplement specified that remove traps applied specifically to small trap devices such as poison needles, yet later editions lost the specification and made the ability appear to apply to all traps, large or small. The Rule Cyclopedia would later specify that the traps thieves could find and remove were either room traps or object traps. Presumably, a room trap is something like a pit trap, while an object trap is something like a poison needle hidden in the lock of a treasure chest. I've heard the argument that having thieves be able to remove small mechanical traps with a roll, but not be able to disable larger traps is a good thing because the former is too small scale to handle through narrative description, while the latter isn't. It's a sound argument, though I think that the roll is initially low enough that it shouldn't usually prevent the players from tackling that trap in the usually espoused method of narrative description and verbal back and forth with the DM. TLDR, OD&D only has removed traps apply to small mechanical traps, but I don't think that's functionally all that different from having the skill apply to all traps in general. You can summon Cthulhu. Yep, you can summon Cthulhu in OD&D. Greyhawk added the 9th level spell Gate, which allows the caster to open a cosmic portal for an ultra powerful being like Odin, Set, Cthulhu, etc. to come through. The spell advises the caster to have a darn good reason for summoning them, and there is a 95% chance the being will come, a 5% chance some other being will come, and a 5% chance that any being that does come will see what's going on and go back the way it came. It actually seems really appropriate for Cthulhu to peek his tentacled head through a portal, see what's going on, and leave, accomplishing nothing other than reminding people that a terrifying being like him exists. Gary Gygax didn't invent the thief. It's pretty well known in the OSR community, but Gary Gygax did not actually invent the thief class. Instead, another Gary, Gary Switzer, invented the thief class and called Gary Gygax on the phone to tell him about it. The story goes that a player at Switzer's table, Daniel Wagner, wanted to get past the door but couldn't because his dwarf follower was too weak. So he asked his DM if the dwarf could pick the lock using his dexterity. The DM said yes, and from there, they developed the thief class. Their version of the thief apparently didn't use the percentile skill system Gary Gygax gave, but instead had spell-like abilities they could just use to do things. In an interview the Save or Die podcast did with Daniel Wagner, he made it sound like their version of the thief might have an ability that lets them pick all minor locks, and at a higher level, they might be able to pick all moderate locks, and so on. Something to that effect. He also indicated that he was working on making a new version of that early thief for modern audiences, but I don't believe anything has come out of it yet. Either way, I've linked that podcast interview and a great article on the subject in the description if you're interested. You can play a dragon. D&D has always encouraged people to prioritize fun and imagination over going by the book perfectly, and that was never as explicit as it was in the original edition of the game. In the section describing classes, it outright says you can play a dragon if you want to. I'll read the full paragraph so you can experience it for yourself. Quote, "There is no reason that players cannot be allowed to play as virtually anything, provided they begin relatively weak and work up to the top, i.e., a player wishing to be a dragon would have to begin as, let us say, a young one, and progress upwards in the usual manner, steps being predetermined by the campaign referee." Close quote. I think this is really cool, and I don't think any other edition of D&D has ever so explicitly given players permission to do whatever they want. Plus, OD&D itself is incomplete enough that you can do things like this without messing up other things or imbalancing other things. Try to do something like this in 5e, and people would tear their hair out about how your dragon PC is overpowered. Read Magic. One spell with confusing implications is the first level spell Read Magic, which allows magic users to read magical writing on magical items and scrolls. This seems reasonable enough, but what results is a contradiction where magic users can only read other magic users' scrolls and spellbooks if they already know Read Magic. What if you start with some other spell? In that case, it seems you will forever be unable to learn spells from other people's scrolls and spellbooks, as you would be unable to read any scroll or spellbook that had Read Magic on it. I've heard the solution proposed to have all players just start with the spell Read Magic automatically. That fixes that continuity problem. I almost feel like magic users should just be able to automatically read magical writing, unless it's written in a language they can't speak or written in some kind of cipher. I've heard it suggested that every magic user creates their own distinct magical script, and thus you need to cast Read Magic to read the magical writing of another magic user. I feel like that creates all sorts of world building issues around the teaching and dissemination of magic. World building issues I wasn't even considering before trying to wrap my head around this perplexing spell. Weapon versus armor mistakes. Greyhawk ported the weapon versus armor matrix from chainmail into D20 friendly format, but mistakes were made during the conversion. The blogger D&D Delta has a great article on the subject, which I've linked in the description. Basically, Gary didn't correctly port the original 2d6 system to the D20, and the result was some weapons benefited more than others, and some really got nerfed. A key example is the mace, which went from nearly ignoring armor in chainmail to basically being ignored by armor in Greyhawk and AD&D. 5e PCs heal 100 times faster than OD&D PCs. Another gem from that same blogger is the discovery that 5e PCs actually heal 100 times faster than OD&D PCs. In OD&D, you recover 1 hit point every other day of full rest after an initial day of rest, which is a real glacial pace of healing. D&D Delta documents how this rate of natural healing accelerated throughout the editions to the point that a 5e PC, using their hit dice naturally, heals at a rate 100 times faster than an OD&D PC. I've linked that article in the description, so you can double check his math if you want. I'm not a math guy, so I didn't even try. It's definitely an interesting read regardless. You can make your own spells. Another proof that OD&D is the edition of D&D that gives the most freedom to players and DMs is the fact that it has rules for players creating custom spells. The rules for this are fairly comprehensive, with very high gold costs, research time requirements, and chances of failure. It leaves it to the DM to ensure that the created spell is appropriately leveled. All in all, this is a really cool system, and I can't wait to use it one day. Tier 9, Eldritch Wizardry. Eldritch Wizardry was published in 1976 and is the third official supplement to original Dungeons & Dragons. The supplement adds a new cleric subclass, druids, as well as complex initiative rules, very complex rules for psionics, and interesting new artifacts. Psionics. The system given for psionics and eldritch wizardry is very complex, and I don't really understand it that well, so I'll do my best to summarize it. First, a player character is rolled up, and, as long as they aren't a druid or monk, they have psionic potential. Second, any eligible character with a wisdom, intelligence, or charisma higher than 15 rolls percentile dice. If they get a result of 91% or higher, they have psionic ability. They then have to roll percentile dice again to see how likely they are to gain new psionic abilities as they level. Psionic abilities are similar to spells, and there seem to be 3 types of psionic abilities: psionic abilities for psionic combat, psionic abilities for psionic defense, and non-combat psionic abilities. There are a lot of rules for psionics, and I can see why Gary Gygax himself said he never really used psionics. I do think it could be cool to run a Star Wars-style OD&D campaign where psionics replace spells in most magic, though. Druids. Eldritch Wizardry adds the Druid subclass, and it is eligible to any cleric that has a wisdom of at least 12 and a charisma of at least 14. I'm honestly not sure why a druid would need to be so charismatic when they're a nature-oriented class. Regardless, how they work is they must have neutral alignment, they cannot turn undead, they use mistletoe as a holy symbol, they can't wear chain or plate armor as well as most weapons, and their first level spells, acquired at second level mind you, are very niche with almost no obvious combat application. In exchange, though, they can eventually do things like identify plants, speak special tongues like Druidic and Pixie, turn into animals to shuck off damage taken, and cast powerful spells like Call Lightning. My honest impression is that they seem woefully weak compared to every other class, and that most of their abilities would be niche, even in a campaign intended to cater to them. If I were to ever use them, I think I would make them their own class rather than a subclass, remove the ability score requirements, have them progress in spell access like a magic user, and use them in a campaign seriously based around enchanted forests, extensive interaction with mischievous fairies, survival elements like discerning between poisonous and nutritious berries, and frequent combat with animals and other druids. In a standard campaign that is mostly set in a dungeon, settlements, or crossing plains, this subclass just seems completely useless. If you have any experience playing this subclass and disagree with my assessment, do let me know down below. A remaining gaping hole in the rules to this point was initiative and the combat sequence, as Chainmail had rules for that, but they were wargame rules, and most players didn't have access to Chainmail. Eldritch Wizardry attempted to correct this by adding a system for handling that. Unfortunately, it's really complex. It splits a melee round into 6 segments and factors in dexterity as well as conditional things like surprise, armor worn, and what spell you're using to determine in which round you act. It also has a system for determining how fast you can move in melee based on where you fall into the order. It seems needlessly complex, but perhaps some people have found benefit from using it. I do like some of the ideas within, such as having heavier armor and greater injuries make you act slower to reflect the simulated reality, but this rule set overall seems too cumbersome to successfully pull those things off in a playable way. I know AD&D has a system either similar or nearly identical to this, but I don't know how many people actually used it. Again, if you used this system, let me know what your experience was with it. Nude art. OD&D featured multiple instances of nude art throughout its run, so I am going to show them and explain their context for the sake of historical interest. If you do not wish to see this, then I encourage you to click on the timestamp in the description below. With that out of the way, let's begin. The first nude piece in OD&D is featured on page 27 of Volume 1 of the core book set, Men in Magic, and it is simply labeled Beautiful Witch / Amazon Princess. I have no idea why it's here. It's just randomly inserted between spell descriptions. Maybe the authors think the reader had gotten bored at this point. I don't know. The second instance of nude art is in the Greyhawk supplement on page 50, and it features a basically nude male hero rescuing a nude maiden from what appears to be some kind of bird or lizard monster. She appears to be tied up to some kind of invisible tree with invisible rope. The next piece is found in the Blackmore supplement on page 25, and it depicts a harpy. I will say that I do think this illustration is more visually appealing than what we've seen before, and I'm saying that from a purely artistic perspective. The next four instances of nude art come from Eldritch Wizardry. First, the cover itself features a nude woman lying on some sort of altar, likely in preparation for a ritual or sacrifice of some kind. It's a very featureless depiction, so it's really not that offensive. The next nude illustration is on page 26, and it's a topless woman with a large coiling snake bottom and 6 arms battling adventurers with 6 swords. At this point, the text doesn't clarify what it is. The next one is on page 33, and it is of a nude succubus. Not really much else to say about it. The page after that features the previously depicted 6 armed snake woman, and it turns out that this is supposed to be some kind of female demon. Anyway, these are the instances of nude art in OD&D. It's definitely curious that they chose to include nude artwork to that extent. I don't know if the 1970s were just more relaxed around nudity, or if at this point the hobby was assumed to be more for adults than for children, or if they were just trying to emulate the 20th century pulp fantasy novels that often depicted male and female nudity or near nudity. I don't know. Maybe it's a combination of all three. Anti-Animal Shell. One of the funnier spells on the Druid spell list is the spell Anti-Animal Shell, a clear take on the iconic Anti-Magic Shell. I must say that warding yourself against all magic has to be much more useful than warding yourself against all animals. Maybe this is a great spell in the safari setting with constant rhino stampedes. I don't know. Demon types. Eldritch Wizardry introduces types of demons, and they're all quite cool, though it is disappointing that most of them are unnamed. Type 1 is some kind of tall, skinny bird man, and they're the weakest of the demons. Type 2 is some kind of toad man. Type 3 is some kind of dog-faced humanoid with goat horns, 4 arms, and crab pincers. This thing is such a jumbled mess of animal parts that you could probably replicate it with 100% accuracy on the game Spore. Type 4 is supposed to be some kind of horrific mix of ape and boar features, along with tiny wings that humorously can't lift its giant body and goat legs. I showcased Type 5 in the prior segment about nude art, so I won't describe it here. Type 6 has no illustration, and it appears the description actually got cut off. After Type 6 are demon princes like Orcus. Orcus. Orcus is a giant fat demon prince with bat wings, a goat head, goat legs, and a tail. He is exceptionally powerful and carries Orcus's wand, a magic item that can instantly kill most beings it touches. I must admit that the illustration of him undersells how threatening and terrifying he is meant to be. He looks more like a middle-aged dad at a barbecue than one of the greatest demon princes. Demigorgon. The other iconic demon prince that appears in this supplement is the Demigorgon, and the illustration for it is as goofy as all get out. It's a giant, scaly creature with 2 baboon heads, tentacles for arms, and 2 more tentacles as a tail. He's also exceptionally powerful and has a special hypnotic power in his gaze. Demons' amulets. An interesting detail is that demon princes contain their essences or souls in small containers, much like phylacteries or horcruxes. Possessing the amulet allows you to control the demon prince for 24 hours. Afterwards, you'd best return or destroy it. If you destroy it, then the demon prince is condemned to abyssment for a year. If the user returns the amulet to the demon prince and is extremely careful and extremely lucky, then they might avoid the eternal wrath of an enraged demon lord. Altogether, finding a demon amulet seems like an incredible plot point for a higher level party. I'd love to use that one day. Intellect Devourers. Intellect Devourers are another iconic D&D monster that appears in Eldritch Wizardry. They're described as being balls of blackness with legs and claws. They sneak up on their prey expertly and ambush humanoids to harvest their psychic energy. They're immensely powerful, and even instant death spells only have a 25% chance of killing them. Mind Flayers. Mind Flayers are another iconic D&D monster that appears in this supplement. They are described as humanoid creatures with octopus-like heads and 4 tentacles. coming out of those heads that penetrate people's heads to try to reach the brains upon success. They're also quite psychically powerful. They really are among the most iconic of D&D monsters, as the success of Baldur's Gate 3 illustrates. St. Cuthbert was real. St. Cuthbert was a deity in Gary Gygax's home campaign, and a church of St. Cuthbert is iconically featured in the classic AD&D module Village of Hamlet, including his iconic catechisms, which include these gems: square corners can be pounded smooth, thick heads are not made of glass, and salvation is better than smart answers. This iconic deity's primary artifact, the Mace of St. Cuthbert, is featured in Eldritch Wizardry. A fun fact is that there actually was a historical St. Cuthbert, and he was an Anglo-Saxon bishop in England in the 600s. I assume Gary Gygax encountered the name and attached it to an otherwise unrelated deity simply because he liked it. You can be turned into a dwarf. Another artifact included in this supplement is the Axe of the Demon Lords, which has a funny quirk wherein it slowly causes its wielder to resemble a dwarf, making them shorter, stockier, and bearded, as well as gaining dwarf abilities like infravision and dungeon construction know-how. I would really enjoy giving this weapon to a female player character and seeing them slowly turn into a male-looking dwarf. Vecna is an anagram. The eye and hand of iconic D&D antagonist Vecna also appears in this supplement, and a fun fact about Vecna is that it is an anagram of Vance, the last name of Jack Vance, whose book series The Dying Earth inspired D&D's magic system, hence it being dubbed Vancian magic. You can kill Vishnu. Yep, you can kill the Hindu god Vishnu in D&D. The 1976 4th D&D supplement, Gods, Demigods, and Heroes, included facts and statistics for a very large list of deities, ranging from Greek to Egyptian to even Finnish to Hindu. Naturally, it's a controversial decision to give hit points and combat statistics for a religion that is observed by over 1 billion people worldwide. I'm not one to castigate people of the past for not being politically correct, but even I will admit that it was in poor taste to include the Hindu pantheon in this book. Outside of that misstep, the book really does include a wide range of mythologies and pantheons to draw from, though its value has probably been greatly reduced by the existence of Wikipedia. Swords and Spells. The fifth and final supplement to OD&D was the book Swords and Spells, published in 1976, and this book is described by the authors as being the grandson of Chainmail and is an attempt to make wargaming rules that are compatible with the entire D&D product line. My understanding is that this book didn't sell well, and it doesn't appear that many people ended up using it. It seems safe to say at this point that real wargamers were a small minority of the D&D fan base, and that there wasn't really that much of a market for wargaming material. Thank you for watching, everybody, and have a good day.